Thank you, Congress organizers, for the invitation to be part of this wonderful event. And thank all of you for, well, I know why you hung around. I just saw that wonderful performance with you. Let's give those dancers a hand. It's fantastic. Fantastic. So I know I've got my work cut out for me following wonderful, wonderful speeches this morning, this afternoon, that have given us all a continued and maybe deeper, improved sense of what it might be like for a person with autism spectrum disorders, for that child or young adult's family and siblings and community. And our general purpose we can all agree on is how can we work together as families, as practitioners, as professionals, as school leaders, as policymakers, to help make the world a better place for people with disabilities, for all people, and particularly with our interest here today for individuals affected by autism spectrum disorders. We've got a slight change in the program. My favorite topic is American baseball, and my second favorite topic is food and making beer, and all of those perhaps we could talk about later. But Tanya, she said, you know, our plan was we would sit together. There were two chairs there. And she says, I'm going to ask you some questions. And I said, uh-oh. I said, well, what might you ask me? She says, well, you know, I think it'd be, you know, what is this applied behavior analysis? Could you talk a little about ABA? What is ABA? And particularly relevant for our time together today and these 2 days at this conference is why is applied behavior analysis, why is education and treatment programs informed by applied behavior analysis, why are they so important for children with autism and their families? She said, if we have any time left over, I would also ask you, well, could you suggest some resources and places where people interested in learning more about ABA and how it might help improve the quality of life for people with autism, maybe you could share those. And I thought for a minute, and I said, you know what? That's exactly, I said, what brilliant questions. That's exactly what I prepared for Sunday morning's talk. So we did a little shift, and I'm going to do, you saw the title slide, the talk advertised for tomorrow. When we're all back here tomorrow, well rested and ready to go again, I'll talk about using how families can use contingency contracting in the home and in their family environment to improve parent-child interactions. And I hope that this today's talk will help set a context for that, as well as for my colleagues who will be speaking tomorrow, sharing with us a variety of the background research in applied behavior analysis and various teaching strategies that are being used to help children with disabilities. So, that's the outline. I have done my best to speak slowly in my very poor English so far. I'll probably start speaking faster than I should. My students always, slow down, slow down, slow down. I want you to know that all of the slides they're already available for you. You can type in this URL, you can scan this QR code. The slides are available as a PDF. You can access them and review them at leisure should you wish to do so. Also, you will find several articles, materials for practitioners that help put into practice some of the strategies I'll briefly introduce today. So I will bring this slide up with the QR code a couple of more times, so we'll get rolling. Don't worry if you don't have it down right now. The field of autism has undergone enormous changes in recent years. moving from what was not that long ago a relatively rare and unrecognized disability to one of increasing awareness and widespread interest in education, psychology, medicine, and society in general. And while autism has intrigued psychologists, physicians, and researchers, it can at the same time be an incredibly demanding, exhausting, sometimes frightening experience for the parents and families of children with autism. And until quite recently, the prognosis, the future prediction for a child diagnosed with autism was extremely poor, with problems of communication, social interaction, and daily living persisting into adulthood for 90% of individuals. But today, teachers, therapists, and parents around the world are taking advantage of the findings of a large and continually growing body of scientific research, particularly from a discipline called applied behavior analysis. And they're doing that, they're using the knowledge from that science of ABA to improve the quality of life for many children and adults with autism. Well, how is autism spectrum disorder, how is it viewed from the perspective of people who practice and teach and do research in the science of behavior analysis? Well, I think one of the best descriptions of that perspective was offered by Gina Green, where she said, autism is a syndrome of behavioral deficits and excesses that has a biological basis, but nonetheless is amenable to change through carefully orchestrated, constructive interactions with the physical and social environment. And that's exactly what people putting into practice knowledge from ABA, applied behavior analysis, do. They make thoughtful arrangements of the child's environment, daily experience, whether at home, at school, in the playground, in the community, to try to change, make the adaptive behaviors that will improve the child's quality of life occur more often, in replace of behaviors that get in the way of enjoying high quality of life. Parents around the world today know or have heard that there's something called ABA that can help our children. And really the genesis of that worldwide awareness occurred back in 1993. It began with the publication of a book called Let Me Hear Your Voice, A Family's Triumph Over Autism. It's written by Catherine Maurice, the mother of a child of two, first her son, later her daughter, children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, and sharing her family's experience, a common one around the world, of first desperately trying to find some help, some effective help for their children, being led to this treatment, that treatment, do this, don't do that, and eventually connecting with people who were effective at using knowledge from ABA to teach their children. That book was a worldwide bestseller. It's been translated into half a dozen or so languages. It's still in print. If you're not familiar with this book, I highly, highly recommend it. The author, Catherine Maurice, has a PhD in French literature. She's really smart, a great writer. It's a wonderful story. But it brings a powerful, powerful message. Just another example here. This is a cover of the Autism Advocate magazine published by the Autism Society of America, and now some 10, 12 years ago, dedicating their entire issue to applied behavior analysis. There's this powerful tool for improving the lives of people with autism. Okay, so what is it? Applied behavior analysis is the science in which tactics, things that we do, that are derived from something called principles of behavior. Those tactics are applied very systematically, thoughtfully, for a reason, to improve socially significant behavior fancy thing for things that kids do, people do that make their lives better, that are important. And experimentation is used to identify the variables responsible for any learning that occurred. Well, that's a textbook definition. I'm rather fond of the textbook that it was taken from. But a simpler, everyday, meaningful definition of applied behavior analysis, it is the science of behavior change. The science of behavior change. Got to keep that term science at the forefront of our understanding and application of information derived from ABA. Now, there are other disciplines, certainly, that are interested in behavior, child development, and how to improve it. What sets behavior analysis apart, and behavior analysts, the people who use and promote and advance this science, what sets behavior analysts apart from these other disciplines is how behavior analysts determine if something they're doing, an intervention, a teaching, a lesson design, is effective. Is it working? And that's the analysis in applied behavior analysis. It's a particular kind of analysis called experimental analysis. Applied behavior analysts take data. They observe the child's behavior, very systematic, very carefully. They keep a record day to day, sometimes moment to moment, depends on what behavior we're trying to change. And they take those numbers, those timings, those data, and they make a picture called a graph. And then they look at the graph. Don't put it away and look at it next month or next year. Well, we're going to have an IEP meeting if you let's get the data. No, we look at it ideally every time we teach a lesson. We look at our data. Is the behavior improving? Is it not? And then we use that information to help us determine experimental analysis. Has it changed as a result of our teaching, of our intervention methods? It enables applied behavior analysts and teachers and parents and practitioners who are using that science to say, I see it, it worked. Okay. Applied behavior analysis is a young science, as sciences go. Now, the conceptual and empirical foundations date back about 100 years to the 1930s with B.F. Skinner's work. But two events marked the year 1968 is really the birth of this branch of the general science behavior analysis called applied behavior analysis. And in that year was the first issue of today still the field's flagship primary scientific journal called, you guessed it, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. Coincidentally, in that same year, Skinner published a book called The Technology of Teaching, in which he outlined his ideas on how these scientific principles of behavior could be used to help us design and deliver academic curriculum, make schools more effective. That's 52 years ago. Now, I don't see anybody in the room that's even been born before then, so you're all thinking, wow, it's a really old science. We must know a lot. You know what? We do know a lot, but more is being acquired. The knowledge improves and deepens every year, every year. Nevertheless, everything that was published in that first issue of JABA, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, everything that Skinner described in his book 52 years ago is still relevant today. However, today's teachers and practitioners have that early foundation and then the 50 years of research that has improved and deepened it beyond. Now, with respect to applying knowledge from ABA to improve the lives of children and families affected by autism spectrum disorders, there have been, well, frankly, many hundreds of studies now around the world by teams of researchers, multiple countries, many families, many schools contributing. And the overall finding is that compared to every other way that we have today to try to understand how to best teach children with autism, this science called ABA gives us the most useful information. And this is research that compares ABA-informed, for example, early intensive behavioral intervention schools and programs for very young children to children that get models that are kind of business as usual or eclectic models or psychoeducational models or you name it. Time and time again, programs that apply knowledge from applied behavior analysis produce the most positive results for the most children. Now, I hope I remember to say this several times, and at least at the end I'll say it right now. You're obviously hearing somebody really advocating for, we all need to learn more about ABA and how we can use it to make schools better and improve children's lives. It's not magic, it's not a miracle, and it's not a guarantee. This is not some silver bullet. We're going to start using ABA in our home and in our school tomorrow, and everything will just be overnight wonderful. The reality is, when done well, when done consistently, when what we do is guided by our data, there's real evidence that the vast majority of children with very significant, including those with very significant disabilities, make marvelous improvements and enjoy a better quality of life. I'll just mention this National Standards Project. The reports from this effort to review many hundreds of studies, peer-reviewed research, on all kinds of educational treatments for children with behavior analysis, with autism. They've published a couple of summary reports. I have downloaded those PDFs. They are available for you right now if you go to the link. And you could look at all of that yourself. Don't take my word for it. But this very detailed, several years long project reviewed more than 800 published studies. And collectively, the group determined what they identified as 14, they called them established treatments. They gave, from how are different interventions named in the literature, they said there's 14 things where there's a lot of research. You can apply these with good confidence, they'll work. 11 of the 14 established treatments are direct or derived products of the science of applied behavior analysis. Well, Don Baer, he's one of the founding, really, fathers, and he's the editor of the group of people that began the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. He actually was a professor at the University of Kansas in child and family development, early childhood development. And Baer was asked once, well, why, Don, is ABA the discipline that has the discipline that is most effective, provides evidence for the most effective treatment for children with autism? I'll get it. He thought for a minute and he said, well, I think that is because applied behavior analysis is the field that has most consistently studied the problem of what behavior changes, in other words, what to teach, made in what order or sequence and by what procedures or techniques will result in maximum, optimal benefit for the child. In other words, that goal of the best improvement that we can do in the child and family's limited and precious time to be in our care, to be in our schools, to be in our programs, to be in our home. It's precious and limited for all children. It's especially important for children with special needs and disabilities. So this science of ABA, the folks doing the research and the practice are always being driven by how can we do better? How can we do better? And now you've got a little more than a half century of people doing that, there's a lot of good information on how we can teach children with autism spectrum disorders better. So, what behavior changes are typically recommended by schools and programs implementing their curriculum and instruction with knowledge from ABA? Again, I'm relating to this classic paper by Don Baer, and he said, well, communication skills are the highest priority. Communication skills give the child more and more control over his or her social environment. I'm going to show a brief clip, a teacher and a young girl with autism. And what you will see and what is obvious is, here's this teacher, it could be a mom, could be an older sibling, could be a neighbor, and they're doing a very typical childhood activity. They're coloring, and the child's going to cut something out and then tape it and paste it. I'll just run the video, it's only about a minute or two, and then do my best to summarize what we saw.
Aurora, how old are you?
7 years old.
Very good. You know what? I'm 24.
I'm 7 years old.
Good job. What color are your eyes?
Red.
No. Aurora, what color are your eyes?
Yellow.
No. Aurora. Hey, stop. What color are your eyes?
Yellow, no brown.
No, you're right. What color are your eyes?
Brown.
You're right. Good
I said
job.
my eyes are brown.
Yeah, they are. Good job. Aurora, I like your picture. Now what?
Scissors.
What? Can you ask for her?
Can I have scissors, please?
Sure. Let's see if we can find some scissors. A coconut house?
A coconut house.
Who lives in your coconut house?
It's a red piece of fire, and it burns up doors.
Oh my. Who lives in the coconut house? Does the girl live in the coconut house?
Yes.
Yes.
So we cut her out and put her near the coconut house.
Put her what? Put her...
Near the...
Do you need something else,
I need
Aurora?
some glue.
Okay, that was good asking.
Glue.
Blue?
Glue, not glue, it's glue. So you can paste and
There you go.
you gotta put the girl near the house.
There you
She's
go.
far away, just put the girl.
Aurora, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Control the social environment. The very end. She wants the glue, right? How do I get stuff right now? Well, I cry, I whine, I just grab it, I go try to get it. And sometimes those behaviors don't work very well. They're not going to carry me a long way in life. And it's good that if I can learn to communicate, ideally, but not necessarily by vocal verbal language, by speech. There are other ways we might communicate with an alternative or augmentative communication device, exchange a picture, but that's communication. And so we're replacing just grabbing things or throwing a tantrum to get what we want by making this child's setting the arrangement where she can begin to use her emerging language skills in a real, meaningful, natural environment setting. So you look at this, you say, well, that's nice. They're not teaching now. It's a rest or play period. It certainly is a play period. There's a whole lot. We could spend an hour talking about that 2-minute video and the variety of sophisticated instructional strategies, tactics that teacher did. But the primary one is something called embedding motivating operations. Ooh. So, kind of hidden within this interaction in this lesson, the teacher has purposely kept the scissors away, purposely had the glue away. She knew it was almost certain that Aurora would be motivated she would want to have the scissors, she would want to have the glue, because they're going to cut something out and paste it. And so she sets it up to make it easy for Aurora to use her emerging language skills to get what she wants, to get what she's motivated for. But this is hard for Aurora. This is all new. She's got years of getting what she wants by other behaviors that are easier than this new scary thing of language and communication. So when she wanted to cut out the coconut to go in the fire to go in the coconut house, she looked, there's no scissors. She started to just rip it, right? I'll just rip it out. Teacher just gently kind of blocked that. And then she said, scissors. She got the scissors. Then she wanted to paste. Now she knows where the teacher had hidden. The scissors were in that bucket. I'm going to go get. Teacher just gently stops her. And she says, what do you want? She says, glue. She hands the glue. Aurora reaches for the glue. The instant she says, thank you, teacher lets go of the glue. Did she get an M&M for saying thank you and the teacher said, say thank you? No. Maybe earlier in some teaching we needed to do something like that. But now she got the natural, immediate, positive reinforcement. The same kind of consequence that maintains all of our communications with one another in that lesson. Very few people would see that and identify it as, that's ABA. Bear suggested that social skills are the next priority. Social skills, well, they make the child more endearing, more likable to parents and acceptable to others. But again, critically, a child with good social skills has more and more control over her social environment, the kind of control that other people find appropriate and adaptive and acceptable, and make it more likely that others within and outside the family welcome that child and like to have that child in their midst and be part of their group. Here's a brief video of a social skills application. The little girl on the right has autism spectrum disorders. The two girls to the left are typically developing classmates. She was in second grade when we did this video a few years ago. Allison, the child with autism. Allison spent about half of the day in a special education classroom, pull-out classroom, where she was receiving intensive practice and skills to develop language skills, social skills, independent skills, relevant academic skills. But she spent about half of the day, an increasing amount of time, in the regular second grade classroom. The special education teachers, who just happened to be master's degree graduates of our program in special education and ABA, they worked collaboratively, hand in hand, just like the children are hand in hand. They work collaboratively, hand in hand with their colleagues, the general education teachers. And one of the things they did to make it more likely that Allison would get involved and eventually make more friends and learn more in the regular education classroom is they had these two girls. They were really spies. They were not spies, they were cohorts. They became part of the teaching team. Within this large and growing body of research in ABA, relative to helping children with autism and other special needs, there's a group of interventions or tactics called peer-mediated interventions. In other words, we get peers, classmates, friends to become part of the teaching team. Peer tutoring is one example where children in the classroom might team up and practice and help one another with academic skills. This is a peer-mediated intervention for social skills. Allison was extremely shy. For many years, no speech whatsoever. Eventually some speech. No, didn't want to be involved with people for now. But she's coming out, she's doing better, she's doing better. But Allison, here's how she would talk. When she would talk, it was so quiet. Nobody could hear her, right? Because her voice was so quiet. So one of the things that they would work on, these two girls became, Allison loved them, they loved to work with her. The teachers, special ed and general ed teachers, helped these children, taught them how to play games with Allison in a way that would make it more likely she'd use this language. So they're walking down the hall from the general ed regular classroom to the special ed classroom, and here's just a couple of minutes of what happened.
Alan, we're gonna go ask your friends to play. Okay? They're playing the Oreo game over there. Okay. But you know what? You're gonna have to speak really loud when you ask them, okay? Yeah. Use your good girl voice.
Yes.
Very good asking, Allison.
No, it's not right.
Oh!
Go ahead, Allison.
Good job, Allison. Keep going.
Oh, sorry. Flip it over. Flip that over.
Hey, Allison, flip it over. Whose turn is it? Oh, whose turn is it? Brianna's turn. Say it loud, okay? It's, whose turn is it? Mine's turn. Say it loud. Good job.
Hi, Allison. Good job. Black with silver buttons, all down her back, with she asked her mother, for a big day, say, to see the elephant. Miss Mary, all dressed in black, with silver buttons, all down her back. She asked her mother, for a big day, say, to see the elephants jump the fence. They jump so high, to touch the sky. They never come back.
Is that a smile? Allison's mother saw this videotape. She was just crying. I mean, this was a big watershed for Allison to interact like this with the kids. Now, there's still, of course, a long way to go. And it's to get where we don't need to provide these prompts from the teacher. You know, use your big girl voice, speak louder, look. So those response prompts are gradually withdrawn as the natural occurring kinds of events in the environment take over the natural everyday control of the communication, just as it does for you and me. And then the kids, the peer-mediated friends there, they go back to the general education classroom and they use some of these interaction techniques with Allison, invite other friends to participate, and so forth. Bear suggested that the independence skills are an absolute priority as well. Learning to become independent now enables the child to control his or her physical environment. And as a result of that, have the potential to be a self-directed learner. Gwen, earlier today, we had some great examples how in her program, more and more of the responsibility for learning is turned over to the children. They can do things together, they can access their materials, they can determine a sequence of events they're going to do to solve a problem. But to do all of that, very sophisticated and very important behavior, become a self-directed learner, you've got to be able to manage some aspects of the environment by yourself. The photos here just show a sequence from one published study that did video-based activity schedules. So this little boy with autism, he'd go on the laptop, and there would be pictures of videos, let's say, for example, of a half a dozen different activities. He could choose, touch the one he wants to do. Then the video would play to provide prompts, video modeling prompts of, here's what you do. You initiate the activity, you do it, you put the materials away, you ask someone to play with you, and so forth. And today, around the world, this strategy called visual activity schedules, or just activity schedules, hugely successful, widely used intervention. And of course, it can be done poorly, it can be done okay, it can be done really well. And the best chance of doing it really well is to take data and look, is it working? Can we make it better? Can we change things? But when it's done really well, it can be a powerful procedure. So here's a little video clip of a preschool. And this teacher is a master's degree graduate, again, of our program in special education. So she's licensed as a special ed teacher, but also as an applied behavior analyst. She had a lot of training in the science of behavior change, in addition to her training of all the things an effective, good preschool teacher should know. And in her school, this classroom was half children with autism disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, and half were typically developing kids, learning to learn together and play together.
Groups of 3 or 4 typical peers with the special needs children. They're given 5 choices from the different areas in the room, and as a group they pick 3 choices and they have to follow that schedule as a group together and finish it together. So it works on social interaction skills and following the schedule. And we also have work schedules, which is more where we introduce academics. They go to the computer, handwriting station, and art and craft station, and they're also broken up in smaller groups that they go to each center with. The groups are a mix of typical kids with special needs kids, and we use the typical kids to help them transition from area to area instead of having to have an adult to assist them, and also a computer and handwriting. Some of the kids who may need hand-over-hand help, we encourage the peers to assist with helping them, so the they're not always dependent on an adult. After they finish the area that they're in, they take off the icon, take off books, and when they're all done, they put it in the bucket, put it in, that says they're all done, and that way they know their next choice is, what is left on the schedule.
Playground time, okay.
So there's various ways to implement activity schedules, and in this case, what the teachers were doing, there's always a step in it where the child typically will move, if it's a visual activity schedule, often done with Velcro and icons or pictures for the activity, and you move it from, this is the next thing I'm going to do, to someplace on the schedule or somewhere else to record and be mindful of your own behavior. I finished that one, now it's time to go to the next one. Here they had the little buckets in each activity, and the children would put their icon of that activity. And another way to provide the children are self-reporting for the teacher data on their behavior. There's a lot of misconceptions about what ABA is and is not. I'll just identify a couple of them. Perhaps the most common one is that ABA is and only is something called discrete trial training, or DTT. Well, first of all, behavior analysts did not invent DTT. It's a fancy name for what's been around since the days of Socrates and Plato. It's somebody in the role of teacher and somebody in the role of learner interacting together, but very systematized, where the teacher, in this case, happen to be at a table sitting, holding up a letter or a picture or something, present this antecedent, the child responds or doesn't respond, responds correctly or makes a mistake, the behavior, And then the teacher provides a consequence. Super, well done, let's go to the next one. Or now it's this, try this, or you provide some error correction. There's amazing body of research on how very effectively planned and implemented discrete trial training can help children with autism, and all kids, initially acquire a lot of skills. But if that's all we ever did, we're not doing much to probably help the child improve their quality of life. They need to take those little bits of skills you may have helped me build some strength on in a very controlled, contrived instructional setting. But then you need to help arrange my world so that I put those bits together, use them in practical, meaningful situations in my daily life, and receive the typical consequences that anybody else gets for doing or not doing those behaviors. Every teacher should be skilled in DTT. Teachers of kids with autism should be highly skilled. But that's just one piece of what applied behavior analysis is. Another misconception, ABA is useful, and we may need it, for helping children with very challenging problem behavior, such as aggression and severe noncompliance and tantruming and eloping or running away or destroying materials or throwing myself on the floor or crying, on and on and on. And applied behavior analysis, research from that science has provided a tremendous amount of knowledge on ways to better understand why children behave in ways that seem, it's crazy, why would you hurt yourself? To not only understand why, but to use that knowledge to change their experience with the world so those behaviors occur less often and they're replaced by adaptive, positive behaviors. So there is a tremendous amount of research from ABA on helping us understand and treat problem behavior. So much so, perhaps, that some people erroneously think that's all you use ABA for. You'd never use it to teach reading and writing and arithmetic and science and playing the clarinet and swimming and yoga and horseback riding. But in fact, not only can you, there's research in all of these curriculum areas to help us do better in education, in designing curriculum, lessons, and delivering that instruction. Another misconception is that, well, ABA is appropriate for students with autism, intellectual disabilities, emotional and behavior disorders, but you wouldn't use this ABA stuff with typically developing kids, or, Lord help us, gifted and talented and bright kids. But it's just the science of human behavior, of teaching and learning. So it is, in fact, relevant to all of us and everything that people do from being babies to being up in years. A couple of years ago, a colleague, Tom Critchfield, and I, it began just as a fun thing to do. We wanted to see, well, how many different areas of human endeavor, human life, has applied behavior analysis? Is there research to help us understand that better? And we organized it with the English alphabet from A to Z. And there, just under the letter A, there's 13 things that start with A even before you get to autism. And then we kind of started to play with it and put them all together. And I know you can't possibly read this. Even when you look at the PDFs, it's too small. But this is some 130 of the now almost 250 areas of human life, and what you and I do every day, where there is research showing knowledge from applied behavior analysis can help us do better in those areas. And literally from ADHD to the care of animals in zoos with a Z. teaching an elephant to hold still and hold its mouth open while we do dental work and so forth. Pretty exciting stuff. There is no ABA method. Well, we're using ABA. We're going to do the ABA thing. But in fact, applied behavior analysis, again, it's this science that informs and underlies how we design lessons and how we teach them. It doesn't prescribe any particular teaching method. This photo here just happens to be, visited an in-home program a couple weeks ago, and the woman in the middle is the boy's mother. The woman on the right is the behavior analyst, and Bash, the son, little boy with autism, and part of their sessions that they do is helping mom, give mom practice and confidence in implementing a variety of teaching things. They're starting to do signing to help build language skills. And ABA is not any, what we could call brand name thing. It's not the Lovaas method. It's not pivotal response training. It's not picture exchange communication system. It's the science that underlies all of those. Those all are real things. You can find good peer-reviewed research showing that programs that describe what they're doing as pivotal response training or the verbal behavior method can be very effective. But that's not ABA. ABA is the science that underlies all of that. So what ABA really does is it offers teachers a variety, and this slide just lists some of the many strategies that have been derived and developed from applied behavior analysis. One not on there that we'll talk about tomorrow is called behavioral contracting or contingency contracting. A number of the other speakers are going to cover some of these and other methods as well. Applied behavior analysis, in addition to providing practitioners and families with these evidence or science-based teaching strategies and methods, gives us an underlying philosophy, again, this perspective, a way to think about teaching and learning. And it's a very positive one. It's a very optimistic one. But it's also one that entails a lot of responsibility. It does not allow us to say, she hasn't learned to read yet. It must be because she has learning disabilities. He's tantruming or doesn't, well, he has autism. Well, yes, we described it. We diagnosed as a function of that behavior, but our job's to teach the behavior. If the child is not improving, we're not teaching well enough. So that's part of that philosophy. If you're interested in reading or learning more about that, this is a wonderful paper. And again, this is the same QR code and the same link, and I'll put it up in just a couple minutes again in closing. But this particular paper is available with the materials. So again, applied behavior analysis is not a panacea. It's not, boy, I've found the magic pill. We just take the ABA pill and everything's going to be wonderful. It is, though, the most effective intervention that we have at the current time. Applied behavior analysis does not offer answers as to why autism happens, but it does offer a practical means of helping children who are autistic. It doesn't solve all of our problems, but for the moment, applied behavior analysis offers all children with autism, every one of them, a real opportunity to learn. Now, the next 100 slides, I'm going to go really fast because I was told we have 2 minutes to go. But don't worry, they're all on the PDF and you can see them. What these slides contain are a number of organizations, I better use this clicker, where you can learn more about ABA. And one is ABA International. It has members researching, applying, and teaching this science in some 44 countries around the world. Lots of resources available on the ABAI website. They publish a number of journals. There is a special interest group within ABAI called the Autism Special Interest Group. One of the things that this group has done as a service to the field and to families is to develop something called the Parent Guidelines for identifying, selecting, and evaluating behavior analysts, providing treatment for individuals diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders. That is also available on the website. Behavior Analyst Certification Board, any questions about that, we can talk with my dear friend Dr. Neil Martin, who will speak tomorrow. Neil is actually the BACB's Director of International Development. He's always happy to inform and school any of us on it. But this group also has a number of resources available for free. And this one, Treatment for Autism Spectrum Disorders, Practice Guidelines for Healthcare Funders and Managers. This is also available with the materials. Tremendous organization, Association for Science and Autism Treatment Programs. It was developed by parents and researchers. There's their website. They have a variety of materials. Literally yesterday on Valentine's Day, I get their Facebook feeds, and they had these cute Valentine hearts with good autism sayings. This morning, they have lots of book reviews and critiques of research and so forth. And there's a complete guide of autism treatment for parents. They review that. B.F. Skinner Foundation, Cambridge Center for Behavioral Studies. Again, these URLs will be available for you. And if you really want to get serious, there's a little book on the left called, of all things, Applied Behavior Analysis, a companion textbook for special education teachers. Again, there's the QR code. There is the URL. You've been incredibly kind and patient. Thank you so much.
Thank you, William. We have only a couple of questions before I give the floor to Nigar to wrap it up. So the first one is, some specialists think that ABA can become a puppy training, I'm quoting, exercise in the way that kids get used to get a reward after completing a task. Therefore, they are not motivated to learn without the candy, let's put it this way. What is your view on that, and what is the best way to avoid this deficiency in the therapy? And the second one,
Can I look as you read?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting it. Okay. Kids get a reward after completing, therefore they're not motivated to learn. Okay.
Okay, and the second one is, what is the difference between social and communication skills? As short as possible.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
Now, this is always dangerous to ask somebody who makes their living, or used to, as a professor, because, So Tanya just prompted me, be short. Thank you. Sure, a very common and important question about applications of applied behavior analysis. We very often see the use of tangible reinforcement immediately after. So a child's learning to write her letters or say some sounds, and the child might receive a little piece of candy or a cracker or a cookie, and we immediately appropriately think, well, that's not going to work the rest of your life. We don't get candies and goodies all the time when we're behaving as we should. A skilled teacher, a skilled behavior analyst will use those very contrived consequences as rewards, as reinforcers to get the behavior going. But at the same time, they're pairing, most importantly, themselves as a reinforcer. You know you're really doing well when you arrive into the school, or kids come into and they run to you, not the other way. Or you go into a home to work with a family, and the child's like, I couldn't wait to see you. You are a reinforcer. You won't need M&Ms and candy very long after that, because your attention and your interaction is so important. And there's a variety of things we do. And you thin the schedule where you don't get a candy or a tangible activity. You don't get to watch a video game every time you've done one correct response. And we lean that schedule out. The beauty of this, there's this tremendous peer-reviewed science that can help inform us as practitioners, as teachers. We don't have to make it up by ourselves. We can review, what does the research suggest on how to do this? How to transfer from the very contrived things we do in special education to a more natural environment so that the learner can get the best out of what we're doing. Is there another question, Tanya? She's had enough. No, is there more? Are we okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.